Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stepped off the bus at the Navy Recruitment Center. The morning sun beat down on the concrete, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her folder of documents. At 22, she had spent the last 4 years working dead-end jobs, watching her friends move forward with their careers while she felt stuck in place. The colorful tattoos covering her arms told stories of her past struggles, each one marking a different chapter of her life. The recruitment center buzzed with activity. Clean-cut young men and women sat filling out paperwork, their appearance pristine and professional. Sarah looked down at her long sleeves, chosen specifically to hide the artwork that decorated her skin. She had researched the Navy's tattoo policies extensively, knowing that visible tattoos could affect her chances of advancement, but the regulations had recently changed to be more accepting. "Next," called the recruiter from behind the desk. Sarah approached nervously, her heart pounding as she handed over her high school diploma and transcripts. The recruiter, a stern-faced petty officer with graying hair, barely glanced up as he processed her paperwork. "Any tattoos?" he asked without looking at her. Sarah hesitated for a moment before rolling up her sleeves. The recruiter's eyes widened as he saw the intricate designs covering both her arms. A phoenix rising from flames wrapped around her right forearm, while geometric patterns and meaningful quotes decorated her left arm. Each piece was expertly done, but she could see the judgment in his eyes. "That's quite a collection," he said, his tone neutral but his expression skeptical. "You understand these will be visible in some uniforms?" "Yes, sir. I've read all the updated regulations. They're all within the new guidelines," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The recruiter made several notes on her file before handing her a stack of forms. "Complete these and report for your physical next Tuesday. We'll see if the Navy is a good fit for you." Walking home that evening, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being set up to fail. The recruiter's dismissive attitude and the stares from other potential recruits had made it clear that she didn't fit the traditional military mold. But she was determined to prove them wrong. Sarah had grown up in a rough neighborhood where opportunities were scarce. Her father had left when she was 10, and her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep their apartment. School had been a struggle, not because she wasn't smart, but because she was constantly worried about bills, food, and whether they'd have a place to live next month. The tattoos had started as a form of rebellion, but they had evolved into something more meaningful, a visual representation of her journey through adversity. The week leading up to her physical was torture. Sarah spent hours at the gym, pushing her body to its limits. She had always been athletic, but she knew the military demanded excellence. She practiced push-ups until her arms shook, ran miles until her lungs burned, and studied military protocol until she could recite regulations in her sleep. On the day of her physical, Sarah arrived early, dressed in plain workout clothes that revealed her tattoos for the first time in a military setting. The other recruits stared openly, some whispering among themselves. She heard fragments of conversations. "Gang member, troublemaker, doesn't belong here." But she kept her head high and focused on the tasks ahead. The physical tests were brutal. Pull-ups, sit-ups, a timed run, and various strength assessments pushed every recruit to their breaking point. Sarah watched as several candidates struggled with the requirements, but she completed each exercise with determination that surprised even herself. Her years of physical labor and street-smart toughness had prepared her body for challenges that others couldn't handle. During the written examinations, Sarah's hidden intelligence began to shine. Despite her unconventional background, she had always been a voracious reader, absorbing everything from classic literature to technical manuals. The mechanical comprehension section was particularly easy for her. She had spent countless hours helping her neighbor fix cars to earn extra money for her family. As the day progressed, some of the initial hostility from other recruits began to fade. They watched her excel in areas where they struggled, and a grudging respect started to develop. But the real test came during the interview portion of the evaluation process. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds, a decorated veteran with 25 years of service, conducted Sarah's final interview. His office walls were covered with commendations and photos from various deployments. He studied her file for several minutes before looking up at her with piercing blue eyes. "Ms. Martinez, your test scores are impressive, top 10% in all categories, but I have to ask about your motivation. The Navy isn't a place for people running from something. We need people running toward something. Sarah had prepared for this question, but sitting across from this intimidating figure made her mouth go dry. Sir, I'm not running from anything. I'm running toward the chance to serve something bigger than myself. I want to be part of something that matters. Chief Reynolds leaned back in his chair. Tell me about these tattoos. Each one has a story, doesn't it? For the next hour, Sarah opened up about her life in ways she never had before. She explained how the phoenix represented her rising above the circumstances of her childhood. The geometric patterns symbolized the order she craved in her chaotic life. The quotes were reminders of lessons learned through hardship. Each piece of art was a chapter in her story of survival and growth. I know they make me look different, Sarah concluded. I know people judge me before they know me, but everything I've been through has made me stronger, more determined. I don't want to hide who I am, but I want to become more than I am. Chief Reynolds nodded slowly. The Navy is changing, Ms. Martinez. We're recognizing that strength comes in many forms. Your test scores suggest you have the intellectual capacity for advanced training. Your physical performance shows you have the discipline and determination we value. But the real question is whether you can handle the challenges that come with being different in a traditional institution. Sir, I've been handling those challenges my whole life. I'm ready for whatever comes next. 3 weeks later, Sarah received her acceptance letter and orders to report to basic training. As she packed her belongings, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. The tattoos that had once marked her as an outsider were now part of her story as she prepared to serve her country. Her mother cried when Sarah showed her the letter. I always knew you were special, Mija. Now everyone else will see it too. But Sarah knew the real challenges were just beginning. Basic training would test not just her physical and mental capabilities, but her ability to fit into a culture that valued conformity. She would need to prove herself worthy of the uniform while staying true to who she was. The night before leaving for boot camp, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, looking at the artwork that covered her arms. Each tattoo told a story of survival, growth, and determination. Tomorrow, she would begin writing a new chapter of her story, one that would challenge every assumption people had made about her, based on her appearance. As she turned off the light and headed to bed, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude for the opportunity ahead. She didn't know what challenges awaited her, but she was ready to face them with the same courage that had carried her through everything else in her life. The girl who had been written off by teachers, employers, and society was about to become a sailor in the United States Navy. The journey from the recruitment center to this moment had been filled with doubt, determination, and small victories. But Sarah knew that earning the respect of her peers and superiors would require more than just meeting standards. She would need to exceed them in ways that made her tattoos irrelevant compared to her contributions. Tomorrow would begin the transformation from Sarah Martinez, the tattooed girl from the wrong side of town, into Seaman Martinez, a proud member of America's naval forces. But tonight, she was simply a young woman with dreams bigger than the circumstances that had shaped her early life, ready to prove that courage and character matter more than appearance. The bus pulled into Naval Station Great Lakes at 5 in the morning, and Sarah's stomach churned with nervous energy. Around her, dozens of other recruits looked equally terrified as they gathered their belongings. The drill instructors who greeted them left no room for individual differences. Everyone was immediately subjected to the same harsh treatment that would break them down before building them back up as sailors. "Move, move, move!" shouted Petty Officer First Class Johnson, his voice cutting through the early morning air like a blade. "You are no longer civilians. You are nothing until you earn the right to call yourselves sailors." Sarah kept her sleeves rolled down as they were herded into processing lines. The initial uniform issue, medical checks, and administrative procedures blurred together in a haze of shouted commands and rushed movements. It wasn't until the mandatory shower and uniform change that her tattoos became visible to her fellow recruits. The reaction was immediate and brutal. In the cramped quarters where 60 women were assigned to sleep, work, and live together for the next 8 weeks, privacy was non-existent. As Sarah changed into her Navy-issued clothing, whispers spread quickly through the group. "Look at all that ink," muttered Jennifer Walsh, a college graduate from Connecticut whose pristine appearance screamed privilege. What kind of person does that to themselves? Probably spent more on tattoos than most people spend on cars, added Michelle Turner, whose father was a career military officer. Shows poor decision-making, if you ask me. Sarah tried to ignore the comments, focusing instead on folding her civilian clothes exactly as demonstrated. But the social isolation was immediate and complete. During meals, no one sat near her. During study periods, she found herself working alone while others formed study groups. The other recruits seemed to have collectively decided she didn't belong. The physical demands of basic training were intense but manageable for Sarah. Years of hard work had prepared her body for the challenges, and she consistently scored in the top tier during fitness assessments. However, her academic performance was what really set her apart from the group. During navigation classes, Sarah absorbed complex concepts that left other recruits struggling. Her mechanical aptitude became evident during equipment maintenance training, where she could disassemble and reassemble components faster than anyone else in her division. The instructors began to notice her capabilities, even if her fellow recruits continued to judge her based on appearance. "Martinez!" barked Chief Petty Officer Williams during a particularly challenging seamanship exercise. "Demonstrate proper knot-tying technique for the class." Sarah stepped forward confidently, her tattooed hands moving with precision as she created perfect examples of each required knot. The other recruits watched in grudging admiration as she completed the entire sequence flawlessly, then helped struggling classmates master the techniques. Despite her willingness to help others, the social barrier remained firmly in place. During rare moments of free time, Sarah often found herself alone while others shared stories about their backgrounds and motivations for joining the Navy. The isolation was more painful than any physical challenge the drill instructors could devise. 3 weeks into training, the situation reached a breaking point during a particularly stressful week of evaluations. The recruits were being tested on everything from military protocol to emergency procedures, and the pressure was getting to everyone. Sarah had been helping several classmates study in secret, sharing her notes and explaining difficult concepts during brief moments when the drill instructors weren't watching. But when exam scores were posted, her generosity wasn't rewarded with friendship. Instead, jealousy and resentment seemed to grow stronger. She had achieved the highest scores in multiple categories, making others look bad by comparison. The whispers became more vicious, and some recruits began actively working to undermine her confidence. "Teacher's pet," sneered Walsh during evening cleanup duty. "Thinks she's better than everyone else because she can memorize some regulations." "Probably cheated," suggested Turner. "People like her always find a way to game the system." The comments hurt more than Sarah wanted to admit. She had worked twice as hard as anyone else, studying late into the night with a small flashlight under her blanket. Every success had been earned through determination and sacrifice, but her accomplishments were being dismissed because of assumptions about her character based on her appearance. The breaking point came during a team leadership exercise where recruits were rotated through various command positions. When Sarah's turn came to lead a navigation drill, several of her teammates openly questioned her authority and ignored her instructions. The exercise failed spectacularly, and the entire division faced punishment as a result. "What's your problem, Martinez?" demanded Turner during the aftermath. "Can't handle the pressure when people don't automatically follow your orders?" "I gave clear instructions that were ignored," Sarah replied calmly, refusing to lose her composure despite her frustration. "Maybe if you looked more like a leader, people would take you seriously," Walsh added with a smirk. That night, Sarah sat alone on her bunk, questioning whether she had made the right decision. The technical aspects of naval training were challenging but manageable. The social isolation and constant judgment were wearing her down in ways she hadn't anticipated. She thought about her mother's words before leaving home, about proving that she belonged. But the weight of constant prejudice was becoming almost unbearable. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Their division was being visited by officers from the Naval Academy to observe training exercises and select candidates for advanced programs. Among the visitors was Commander Patricia Hayes, a decorated officer with multiple combat deployments who served as a mentor for promising recruits. Commander Hayes was everything Sarah aspired to become: confident, competent, and respected by everyone around her. She moved through the training facility with authority that came from years of proven leadership. When she stopped to observe Sarah's performance during a damage control exercise, the entire division felt the weight of her attention. Sarah was leading a team through a simulated emergency scenario, coordinating repairs while managing personnel under extreme time pressure. Her natural leadership abilities shone through as she calmly directed each team member, making split-second decisions that saved precious time. The exercise was completed flawlessly, well ahead of the required timeline. "Outstanding work, recruit," Commander Hayes said afterward, her voice carrying across the training area for everyone to hear. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need in today's Navy. For the first time since arriving at basic training, Sarah felt a surge of pride that wasn't immediately undermined by negativity from her peers. But she knew that one compliment from a visiting officer wouldn't change the fundamental dynamic of her situation. The other recruits still saw her as an outsider, and she still faced weeks of training where teamwork and unit cohesion would be essential. That evening, during what was supposed to be personal time, Sarah found herself alone again while others socialized in small groups. She used the time to write letters home, telling her mother about the challenges without revealing how difficult the social aspects had become. She didn't want to worry her family, but she needed some outlet for the emotions she had been suppressing. The next few weeks brought a gradual shift in dynamics as the division moved into more advanced training phases. The complexity of the material meant that natural ability became more important than social connections. Sarah's expertise in multiple technical areas made her an increasingly valuable resource, even for those who had previously shunned her. During electrical systems training, she helped classmates understand complex wiring diagrams. In communications exercises, her quick thinking prevented several groups from failing important assessments. Slowly, pragmatic cooperation began to replace open hostility, though true acceptance remained elusive. The transformation wasn't complete, but cracks were beginning to show in the wall of prejudice that had surrounded Sarah since her arrival. Some recruits started asking her questions about technical subjects, though they were careful not to let others see them seeking her help. A few even began including her in group study sessions, recognizing that her knowledge could benefit everyone. As graduation approached, Sarah realized that she had survived the crucible of basic training, but the real test of her naval career was still ahead. She had proven her competence to the instructors and slowly earned grudging respect from some classmates, but she knew that each new assignment would bring fresh challenges and new people to convince of her worth. The tattoos that had marked her as different would follow her throughout her career, serving as a constant reminder that she would always need to work harder to prove herself. But they also reminded her of the strength she had developed through adversity and the determination that had brought her this far. Standing in formation during their final week of training, Sarah looked around at the other recruits who would soon be her fellow sailors. Some had become allies, others remained distant, but all had witnessed her commitment to excellence. She had laid the foundation for a military career built on competence rather than conformity, setting the stage for the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. 2 years after graduation from basic training, Petty Officer Third Class Sarah Martinez had earned a reputation as one of the most skilled technicians aboard the USS Constellation. Her expertise with advanced radar systems had made her indispensable to the ship's operations, but the social challenges that began in boot camp had followed her throughout her naval career. The ship's electronics division was a tight-knit group of 12 sailors responsible for maintaining millions of dollars worth of sophisticated equipment. When Sarah first reported aboard, the division's leading petty officer had made his feelings clear about her tattoos during the initial orientation meeting. "I don't care what headquarters says about regulations," Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez had announced to the assembled division. "This is a professional workplace, and certain standards need to be maintained. Some people might think body art makes them look tough, but it just shows poor judgment to me." His words had been directed at the entire group, but everyone knew they were meant for Sarah. The other technicians had taken their cue from their leader, maintaining polite but distant relationships with their newest teammate. Sarah found herself eating meals alone, excluded from the informal gatherings where real teamwork and friendships developed. But Sarah's technical abilities were undeniable. During a critical system failure that threatened the ship's primary navigation capabilities, She had worked for 18 straight hours to develop a creative solution that got them operational again. Her innovation saved the mission and earned grudging respect from her immediate supervisors, even if social acceptance remained elusive. The breakthrough came during the ship's deployment to the Mediterranean, where they were tasked with providing support for NATO training exercises. The complexity of coordinating with multiple allied navies required flawless communication systems, and the pressure on the electronics division was intense. Sarah had been working the midnight shift when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. A massive electrical surge had damaged multiple radar arrays, leaving the vessel effectively blind during a critical phase of the exercise. The duty officer was in a panic, knowing that failure to restore systems would result in embarrassing withdrawal from the international operation. "Martinez, what's your assessment?" asked Lieutenant Commander Brooks, the ship's operations officer who had rushed to the electronics bay in his pajamas. Sarah had already begun diagnosing the problem, her tattooed hands moving expertly across control panels and diagnostic equipment. "Sir, it looks like a cascade failure in the primary power distribution system. We're going to need to reroute everything through backup circuits and rebuild the radar processing network from scratch." "How long will that take?" "Standard procedure would be 8 to 12 hours, sir. But I think I can do it in 4 if I bypass some non-essential systems and optimize the signal processing algorithms." Lieutenant Commander Brooks looked skeptical. "That's not in any manual, Martinez. Are you sure about this?" "Sir, I've been studying these systems for 2 years. I know them better than anyone else on board. Give me a chance to prove it." The next 4 hours became legendary among the ship's crew. Sarah worked with an intensity and focus that amazed everyone who witnessed it. She rewired complex circuits, reprogrammed computer systems, and coordinated repairs with a precision that turned chaos into organized progress. Her tattoos, usually hidden under long sleeves, were visible as she crawled through tight spaces and reached into equipment bays that required full range of motion. Other crew members began gathering to watch her work. They had never seen anyone demonstrate such intimate knowledge of the ship's systems or such creative problem-solving under pressure. The division members who had kept their distance were forced to assist, and they found themselves learning new techniques from someone they had dismissed. As dawn broke over the Mediterranean, Sarah completed the final connections and powered up the restored radar systems. Everything came online perfectly, with performance actually improved from the original configuration due to her optimizations. The ship was back in full operational status ahead of the critical exercise phase. "Incredible work, Martinez," said Lieutenant Commander Brooks, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I've never seen anything like that in 15 years of naval service." Word of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through the ship's tight-knit community. The commanding officer personally thanked her during the next all-hands meeting, praising her technical expertise and dedication to the mission. For the first time since joining the Navy, Sarah felt truly valued for her contributions rather than judged for her appearance. The shift in attitude among her division was dramatic and immediate. Petty Officer Rodriguez, who had been her harshest critic, approached her privately after the incident. "Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice heavy with sincerity. "I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong. You're one of the best technicians I've ever worked with, and I should have recognized that from the beginning." The other division members began including Sarah in their conversations and social activities. They wanted to learn her techniques and understand her approach to problem solving. Her tattoos became conversation starters rather than barriers as people asked about the stories behind each piece of artwork. But the most significant moment came 3 months later when the ship returned to Norfolk Naval Base. A change of command ceremony was scheduled, with Admiral Rebecca Chen, the region's highest-ranking officer, attending to witness the transition. As one of the ship's most outstanding performers, Sarah had been selected to participate in the Honor Guard formation. The ceremony took place on the ship's flight deck, with hundreds of sailors in dress uniforms standing at attention. Family members, local officials, and military dignitaries filled the reviewing stands. Sarah stood proudly in formation, her dress blue uniform impeccable despite the tattoos visible on her hands and wrists. As Admiral Chen moved through the formation to recognize outstanding sailors, some family members in the audience began whispering among themselves. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversations, the same type of judgmental comments she had faced throughout her career. "Look at those tattoos on that sailor," muttered an elderly woman whose son was somewhere in the formation. "What has the Navy come to, allowing people like that to represent our military?" "Disgraceful," agreed her companion. "In my day, sailors looked like professionals, not gang members." The comments stung, but Sarah maintained her military bearing and focused on the ceremony. She had learned to tune out such ignorance, knowing that her service record spoke louder than anyone's prejudices. Admiral Chen paused in front of Sarah, studying her service ribbons and commendations. "Petty Officer Martinez, your record shows exceptional performance in technical ratings. Tell me about your recent achievements." "Ma'am, I've been working to optimize our radar systems and improve maintenance efficiency. We've reduced downtime by 30% over the past year." "Outstanding. Your division leader speaks very highly of your capabilities." Admiral Chen's voice carried clearly across the deck, audible to the assembled crowd. "The Navy needs more sailors with your level of technical expertise and dedication." As the Admiral moved on, Sarah felt a surge of pride that was immediately dampened by renewed whispers from the audience. The contrast between official recognition and public judgment highlighted the ongoing challenges she faced as a tattooed sailor in a traditional military culture. The breaking point came after the ceremony during the reception, where family members mingled with sailors and officers. Sarah was discussing technical innovations with a group of senior petty officers when she overheard a particularly vicious comment from a group of civilian guests. "It's embarrassing that they let people like her wear the uniform," said a well-dressed woman whose husband was a retired Navy captain. "Those tattoos make her look like a criminal, not a sailor." The conversation around Sarah stopped as everyone heard the comment. The senior petty officers looked uncomfortable, unsure how to respond to such blatant prejudice from a military family member. Sarah felt her face burning with anger and humiliation, but she maintained her composure and prepared to walk away. That's when Admiral Chen appeared beside their group. She had clearly heard the offensive comment, and her expression was stern as she addressed the civilian guests. "Excuse me," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the authority of decades of command. "I couldn't help but overhear your comment about Petty Officer Martinez." The woman who had made the comment looked flustered as she realized who was addressing her. "Oh, Admiral, I was just saying that perhaps appearance standards could be improved." "Let me stop you there," Admiral Chen interrupted firmly. "Petty Officer Martinez is one of the finest sailors I've encountered in 30 years of naval service. Her technical expertise saved a critical mission just 3 months ago, and her dedication to excellence represents the very best of our military values." The Admiral turned to face Sarah directly, then did something that stunned everyone present. She came to attention and rendered a crisp military salute, holding it long enough for everyone in the area to witness the gesture of respect. "Petty Officer Martinez, it's an honor to serve alongside sailors of your caliber," Admiral Chen said as she held the salute. "Your tattoos tell the story of your journey to naval excellence, and anyone who judges you by your appearance rather than your character is showing their own ignorance." Sarah returned the salute with precision, her heart pounding as she realized the significance of the moment. A 3-star admiral was publicly defending her against prejudice and recognizing her worth as a sailor. The gesture sent ripples throughout the reception as people witnessed the military's highest leadership taking a stand against discrimination. The civilian guests, who had been making disparaging comments, looked mortified as they realized their attitudes had been publicly rebuked by someone of Admiral Chen's stature. Other military families began approaching Sarah to express their support and thank her for her service. As the reception continued, Sarah found herself surrounded by sailors and officers who wanted to share their own stories of overcoming prejudice and proving their worth through dedication rather than conformity. She realized that her journey had inspired others to challenge their own assumptions about what a sailor should look like. Later that evening, as Sarah returned to her quarters aboard the ship, she reflected on how far she had come since that nervous morning at the recruitment center. The tattoos that had once marked her as an outsider had become symbols of resilience and authenticity in a culture that was slowly learning to value substance over appearance. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "Saw the news coverage of the ceremony on the local station. So proud of my daughter, the hero sailor. Love you, mija. Sarah smiled as she read the message, then looked at her reflection in the small mirror above her sink. The phoenix on her right arm seemed to glow in the soft light, a permanent reminder of her journey from the ashes of poverty and prejudice to the heights of military excellence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and probably new people who would judge her before knowing her. But tonight, she was simply Petty Officer Martinez, a proud sailor whose ink told the story of strength, perseverance, and the triumph of character over appearance. The Navy had become her home, and she had earned her place through competence, dedication, and the courage to be herself in an environment that hadn't always welcomed difference. The girl who had been laughed at for her tattoos had become a sailor worthy of an admiral's salute, proving that true leadership recognizes worth regardless of how it's packaged.